Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. This year marks the 200th anniversary of the birth of Abraham Lincoln, and we were observing that important event in many different ways. Robert Cherry, Sterling Edwards, and Millie Carter decided a good way to observe Lincoln's birthday would be to hop in a flatboat in Rockport, Indiana, and go all the way to New Orleans. They are our guests today, and they're going to tell us about this rather important journey. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Captain Cherry, first mate and cook Edwards, and photographer Carter. Captain, why did you all do this?
Well, we thought that it would be a wonderful way to celebrate Lincoln's birthday, and we really wanted to have a good time of going down the river. That was we thought it would be a wonderful trip. They had put the boat together and they were going to take it down the river, but we knew that they needed a captain, and so I applied for that position, and I needed a deckhand, and so I asked Sterling if he'd go because he knew how to tie a knot and knew how to cook, and we thought that would just be a wonderful way, and they accepted our application, and we were able to go.
Now, you two are from Paducah.
Yes.
You're from Chicago.
Yes.
So how did you join this motley crew?
Well, I had made a previous journey with John Cooper, the boat builder, on another flatboat journey with him a few years ago from Louisville to Owensboro with the Ursuline sisters. And so he called me and said, Millie, we're going to do another flatboat. He says, I know you're in. And I said, yes. And so another adventure. The history is what I was really interested in, and meeting the people. And it was awesome.
Let's do some nuts and bolts by the numbers here. The trip took how long?
They said it was going to be 29 days. We ended up doing it in about 28. We've saved a day going down.
And it was how many miles altogether?
It was 1,100 miles from Rockport to New Orleans.
Now, going back to the flatboat itself, how was it built? Who built it, and how did they do that?
All right, John Cooper, who is a dock builder.
And where does he live?
He's out of Gallatin, Tennessee.
Okay, near Nashville.
And he had built about, this was the 13th or 14th boat that he had built. And a lot of the boats that he had built were like props or whatnot for movies, and they would want to take he would build a dock. If he could build a dock, he could build a flatboat. And they just gave him a pretty good idea, and he did a little research and history on it and put it together pretty much along the same lines of what an actual flatboat would have been at the time.
So he built it in Gallatin?
They took, the boat was Mr. Drake, who was the owner of the boat, had commissioned the boat to be built to reenact the forming of the first church west of the Mississippi River by a primitive Baptist who his great-great-great-grandfather was the preacher. Mm-hmm. And they went down and they wanted to have a replica boat to where he could go down and reenact the forming of this church.
And where was that?
This was right up by Cape Girardeau, mm-hmm. And they had left from around Rockport. Well, the people in Rockport decided that they would like to use the same boat, and we made modifications to it, added another 14 feet to the back, and added 2 outboards, 150 horse Mercury Verados, which made the boat handle. Before it was just a floating boat. It was a flat boat that just drifted with the current. And being we were going to go down to New Orleans, we needed the extra.
Yeah, and if you've done any research on flatboats, you see these wonderful pastoral pictures of this thing gliding gently down the river. That wasn't so. They were spinning, and they were like pinballs hitting here. They were extremely difficult to maneuver. So that did gave you some maneuverability there.
Absolutely.
So what day did you start?
We left on September the 9th. Now, I had Coast Guard had to come up, and we had to certify the boat as being safe and able to get out of the way if something was to come down the river that we needed to get to shore. And I had the documentation they needed, and I had run enough boats to where I had all the proper life jackets, and we had installed all the proper safety equipment. We had the lights and the radios and the backups and the fire extinguishers and everything that a normal craft would need. Some of it was hidden to where when you first glanced at it, you wouldn't see it, like the life jackets might be in a box, but they would be within easy reach, and the lights and stuff would be kind of camouflaged until we turned them on at night.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you all traveled at night?
We did travel several nights, and anytime we would anchor out, we'd have to have lights.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, did you have a grand send-off at Rockport?
I think it was wonderful. They had the one of the governors came down. A lot of the people there were they were absolutely, that is their 15 minutes of fame, that Abraham Lincoln lived there, and so the entire town came down. They brought all the school children from the 4th grade. I think I put 400 and some odd kids through the boat, let them come up and walk through. We would put 10 in, then they'd come up, go upstairs, I'd put another 10 on, let those 10 off, but we had to work all the way through the buses. But everybody wanted to take part in it, and it was a wonderful tradition there.
So the photographs, when did you start snapping pictures?
Oh, I was there like a couple of days before, and this was taken on the morning that we left. This was with the tour that Bob was doing, the school children, and so that was that morning. And then we got up and it was raining that morning. So, and Bob, I never will forget it. He takes his umbrella and he says, "Come on, I want to show you something." He had the lights on, the red and green lights, and so we were out photographing. So that was taken a little bit later in the day.
What are the dimensions of that boat?
It was 12 foot wide and 60 foot long.
Which is, a lot of flatboats are about that size.
Most of the flatboats were in stages of 20. They would be 20 foot wide, 40, 60, 80, 100 foot, because the boards that they cut were being sold for lumber. It was actually a floating lumber pile.
Sure was.
And so they would try to cut a 20 foot length. And therefore, that was exactly what you needed to build a 2-story house.
Right.
And so they would have them in 20 foot lengths, and you would take them down to New Orleans.
Right.
And so that's what we got as close to that as we could, but we knew we were going to have to bring it back on a highway, on a truck, and the 12-foot dimension was as wide as we could tow.
Of course, of course, of course. And of course, the reason you don't see flatboats in museums is they were all, as you said, sold for lumber.
One-way.
Built houses that are one-way trips. It would be, excuse me, a little bit difficult to pole when those things back up river, I would think.
The ones that came back up river were called keel boats.
Exactly.
And they were pointed on both ends.
Exactly.
But it took a pretty powerful man to get it up against the current.
It did. So, well, what are some of the adventures that you all had that you could tell us about as you left Rockport and went on down the river?
Well, I would say the greatest adventure was the fact that we knew that it was would run and worked out right. The first 10 miles, we didn't know what our speed would be. We didn't know what our gas consumption was going to be. And we didn't really know whether the very stern where we had the motors bolted down was going to break or not, because we were putting it under such load.
Right. Now, that's a great shot. Now, that was taken from the chase boat?
That was, right. That was, they had just taken off, and they were going to go up the river and turn around and then come back down so that they could wave to the people.
Right.
And so I was on another boat following them.
What bridge is that?
That's the new bridge over at Rockport. It's a new bridge that goes over. I don't know. I don't remember the name of it.
I knew that you'd ask that question. And let me see.
Oh,
I've got 2 different little cards in here, and I'll see if I can't find the name of that bridge.
It looks like the bridge at Cape Girardeau. It's that same style.
Same style.
And that goes from Rockport, Indiana to where?
Over to Owensboro.
To Owensboro. Right. Okay.
Yes.
Exactly. So it was a bit overcast, a bit gray, but
right.
Your spirits were high.
But the spirits were very high. Right.
Exactly. Now, yeah, I noticed on the bow of the boat, Journey to Remember.
Journey of Remembrance.
Journey of Remembrance.
Right.
Journey of Remembrance.
And that piece of wood, that log, came from Ron Drake's, one of the churches there in the Terre Haute area where the boat was built. And
That's great. Now, what are in the big chest there, if we can back up to that?
That's where we were hiding all of our clothes and different things. I had searchlights in one of them, and we had our clothes in the other, so the people couldn't see what was there.
That's terrific.
Your question, the William Natcher Bridge is
the William Natcher Bridge, named for Congressman Natcher, of course. Now, that's the interior.
Yes.
It looks somewhat cozy. You've got a stove in there and some benches. Accommodations. How many? Of course, there was more than 3 of you. You had people coming on and coming off that, didn't you?
We had 20 when we first started to go from Rockport to Owensboro, and that was the most that we had. We would run a contingent of about 10 people on some other stops, and we had 6 basic crews. Sterling and myself, we had the owner and the builder, and we had a man named Bob Gross, who was one of the original men who had a part in the JCs when they did a reenactment in 1958. And we had a Bob Beeler that was he was a journalist that was doing a radio program for the high schools. So those were the 6 people that were on board all the time.
Going back to that first reenactment before the show began, you were talking about that. Was that when your dad was mayor?
Yes, they brought the boat down to Paducah. It was at the foot of Broadway.
Right.
And I was 8 years old.
Right.
And my dad said, come on, son, I'm going to show you we've got some pioneers stopped in Paducah. And he took me down, and they were all JCs, and they had contacted the local JCs, and they were coming down, and they were dressed in period costumes because that was the centennial that we were having in Kentucky at the time for 100 years. And they were all dressed in that type, and I thought they were actual pioneers going to shoot buffalo. And I didn't know where the buffalo were, and they said, oh, it's about 100 miles downriver. And at 8 years old, that sounded like a far
logical, sure.
Logical.
Yeah.
But I always wanted to be on a flatboat after that, and I just took this opportunity. This is the first opportunity that had come up. It took 50 years.
There you go.
I had an opportunity to do it.
Yeah. Now, you were also the cook.
Yes.
Well, what kind of meals did you prepare on the water?
Well, we had fried chicken, hawk.
Fried hawk?
Chicken hawk.
Yeah.
Chicken hawk. Yeah. And how does, you didn't get that at Kroger's probably.
Had pickled buzzard eggs.
Pickled buzzard eggs.
Had frog legs.
Now, frog legs. So where does one get a chicken hawk to fry up?
Close to the river.
Just close.
Whatever comes on.
I see. And you're serious? Pickled buzzard eggs? No. I was going to say, okay, well, I thought so. I thought, this is a good story. Anyway.
No, I cooked just the normal stuff like corned beef, cabbage, chicken and dumplings. And
Wow.
Great steaks.
He makes the best chicken
steak,
dumplings.
So you got a stove on
frog
board?
legs.
Yeah.
Wow. So you all ate pretty well then?
Yeah,
Very well.
Yeah.
I gained a few pounds.
Wow.
We had to improvise with camp stoves and whatnot, but everything came out really good.
Now, we have a picture of, it looks like the cook, and could that possibly be Abraham Lincoln?
That's Abe Lincoln.
And
Go
who was the gentleman playing Lincoln there? Do you know?
We had several along the
bet.
way.
Yeah.
There were several people
I'll
that came
bet.
on board as
He was
Lincoln.
the first. He's from Rockport.
I'd like to say that we were calling the first mate, that's his alter ego, that's Skunk Eye.
Skunk Eye.
Yeah, that's what we
Skunk
were
Eye.
calling him. Instead of Hawkeye, he was Skunk Eye.
Skunk Eye. Okay. Well, tell us about your costume that you have on. Did you already have that, or did you?
No,
This was for the trip.
When I knew I was going to go on the trip, I just started putting it together. I had the Flintlock Festival, which is correct at the time, and the knife, which is made out of deer antlers with the deer hide. And I had the tomahawk. So most trappers in them days, they carried a tomahawk, you know, cut wood or
Sure.
whatever
Right.
to defend themselves. This what they call a possible, what they kept stuff in, like powder, fire making equipment, maybe jerky, and powder horn, you know, for the thing. Carry the bullets in there. And this is the bear claw. The bear got my eye.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
But he shot him.
Yeah, but you got him though, yeah.
Yeah, we had him for supper.
Well, there you are. There you are. So, and the cap, where did you get that?
I've had it for a long time. I can't remember where I bought it.
That's great.
Barry, did you notice
Made
that
out
the
of
skunk-
genuine skunk hide.
The skunk has a patch over his eye too, if you'll look at it.
I've noticed that.
Yeah.
No, I didn't notice that. Is that? That's terrific.
I got this through from the encampment over
Oh,
Yeah.
Fort Massac?
Fort Massac.
Yeah.
This is bear claws,
Yeah.
genuine.
Well, did you all wear costumes too?
I didn't wear a costume because I didn't want to confuse the people. As far as I was the captain of the vessel, and I had to talk with the Coast Guard and whatnot coming through. My uniform consists of cut-off blue jeans and a T-shirt, my normal bill of fare. But Sterling was one of the hits because all the kids wanted to come and talk to him, and he was spinning the tall tales and tell these hunting adventures, and he just put all the rest of them to shame. He wasn't expected to be a period man, and he stole the show.
That's great. That's great. No previous experience. That's wonderful. Now, I'm interested in photography myself. What kind of camera did you use for this?
I have a Canon.
35 millimeter?
I took two. I took my 35 and I took a digital, the Canon 10.
That's
and
great.
I did. I also took a large format camera, which I did not use. It was just, I just got everything I wanted with my digital, and my with the 35 I did all black and white. So I have like 22 rolls of black and white, and I took about 3,000 images on the digital.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So as you're coming down from Indiana, you all would have passed the Cave in Rock. Didn't see any outlaws this time, though, I guess.
Well, they had a band that was supposed to attack us. Now they had
Really?
They had the JCs had attacked the 1958 group.
Really?
Because they were all friends and they were all about the same age, and JC's was real big at the time.
Right.
And they were trying to recreate that, but we got there a little bit early, and we just we stopped and we saw the dam. We came through the dam. We saw Cave in Rock. We went through it, and then pretty much headed on to Elizabethtown because we didn't know whether the weather was going to hold.
That's a great shot of the cave itself. That's
from
really,
inside
really
looking
nice.
out.
It is.
It reminded me of a bell.
Yeah, yeah. And that was an absolutely terrifying place in the early 19th century, the late 18th century. The famous pirates, the Hart brothers, all those in that area coming on down. So the weather looks nice there. So
Yeah.
There's a bend right up from there where going towards Smithland where Harp, they actually cut his head off and put it on a stake, and it was Harp's Head Bend that was up there for years and years.
So down to Paducah. What did you get a reception here in Paducah?
Well, I'll tell you, we were very glad to see Paducah because we ran into the end of Hurricane Ike when we left Elizabethtown. It regrouped, and when we left Elizabethtown at 8 o'clock, we went dead into the storm.
8 a.m.
8 a.m. And the storm had just hit and came through, and we were getting 5-6 foot waves coming up the river, really heavy winds. Everybody went downstairs and was scared, and I could hear Sterling in the back. Every time I jump over a wave, he'd holler, "Yeehaw," because we wanted to make sure that if we had any problems downstairs, that Sterling would let me know what it was if I needed to come to shore, and if I needed him up the top side, I would ring the bell or pull back on the throttles a couple of times, and he'd be right there.
Didn't you all have a boat that followed you?
We had a chase boat.
Yeah.
Called Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark is the lady that her and her husband were following us down in case we had a problem. They could go to shore for help, or they could tow us. We had 2 engines, so we had a backup. But if we needed to have a news person to come out, or if somebody was to have a heart attack or any kind of medical emergency, they could take them immediately to shore.
So down past Paducah, that big bend in the river, all the way down to the confluence. I've canoed that river, and it's on the Ohio, and that confluence is very impressive. I mean, you get down there where those 2 big rivers meet. Now, back to the photographs through the commentary. That is the what?
That's at Paducah. That's the flood wall at Paducah with the American Queen, I believe.
The American Queen. Okay. Okay.
That is Dam 52, right when we're going through Dam 52, coming out of the lock. And that's looking back on the wickets. There's the water's coming over the top of them and through them. The turbulence right there. That's Fort Massac in Metropolis.
Yes. Yeah, that's nice.
That was a really fun time there. We actually got to sleep in the barracks at night.
Really?
Yes, we did. We spent the night there, and these photographs were taken from the stockade, and I was able to climb up to the very top, but it was a lot of fun there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's the mayor of Metropolis. He gave us Mr. Cooper and myself. He gave us Superman awards.
Exactly.
And they had a real nice dinner. The people from Metropolis were just so nice to us. They had what they call the Friends of Massac. They came out and they gave us a dinner, and they had old time music, and had Abraham Lincoln. Now this was, if you look at this Lincoln, he looks on the money. He's spot on Abraham Lincoln.
He does. He really does.
He was at Elizabethtown, Harrisburg, and there, and he was a great Lincoln impersonator.
Is he a local fellow?
He was from somewhere up in central Illinois. But we would like to just thank the people at Fort Massac. Originally, they didn't have the plan to stop at Massac, and I talked them into it. I said because they had these big portraits of flatboats, and that was an original flatboat stopover point. So we ended up adding that. We stayed one night in Paducah and one night in Metropolis.
So about how many miles a day could you make in that thing?
I was running, 50 was a nice journey. 70 was possible. At one time we were at Helena, Arkansas, and I wanted to make the additional run to Greenville, Mississippi, and I made 126 miles that day, but that was an all-day occasion. I was getting about 50 miles was what I could run on the 2 tanks of gas. The engines would each burn 50 gallons, so I was getting a half a mile a gallon average, and I could run with the 2 engines, and after 50 miles I needed to refuel. We bought another auxiliary tank that was 50 gallons that extended it to 75 miles, and I could meet a fuel truck. We were on the telephone that we could call. We had a chase truck. They would stop and get fuel, and we'd meet at any crossing we could get, mile marker where they could get to us, and we would pull up and refuel, and that's what made that possible.
Wow.
But it was an all-day run to get down. We didn't have a radar, and it was difficult to run at night, but I was able to do it just because we didn't want to stay out in no man's land, out just tied up in the river where we could get run over by a tow. We wanted to be in a port.
Yeah.
So we made the concession, and we left. The Coast Guard said I could only run 12 hours, and I was the only captain, and so I could only work 12 hours in a 24-hour period, and that was at 10 miles an hour on the Mississippi River. That's all I could do.
Oh yeah. You mentioned tows. I mean, was that a problem?
Well, I was really thrilled. I actually passed 2 the entire trip.
Wow. Yeah.
But I'm talking about overtaking.
Right.
Now I passed a bunch of them going back and forth, and a bunch of them passed me.
Right.
But we would be in radio contact with them. We would set up which side we were going to pass on, and some of them would give me a slow bell. The rest of the time, the boat could pretty well take any impact because it was instead of a planing hull, it was displacement hull. It sat low in the water, and it was going along at 5.5 miles an hour, so it could pretty well, it would just take a slight jolt. It wasn't slamming like it would be if you were on a flatboat on plane, like a John boat.
Did any of the tugboat captains ask who you were, what were you doing, or?
People came out, talked to us on the radio. They would actually come out and just look at the boat, and then we'd have conversation. They would want to know what it was, and I'd kind of say, well, this is a hillbilly houseboat. So they'd ask me, what kind of jet climate contraption I was coming down, and a lot of them were just thrilled to see what an actual flatboat looked like.
Yeah.
It was very, they were very interested all the way down until we got into the actual harbors in New Orleans, and then we were just a floating lumber pile, and they wanted us out of the way. They were glad for us to, thank you, pass right on through.
Yeah. Getting back to the confluence, which is to me one of the most impressive sites in our areas where these 2 rivers come together. And did you have any problem, of course you're coming down the Ohio, getting into that current of the Mississippi coming down that way?
None whatsoever. Now the owner was scared. He thought that there were sea monsters that lived in the confluence where the 2 came together. He was afraid that a big tree would come down and get us. You could see the muddy water and the clear water.
Oh yeah.
Now the thing of it is right at that point at Cairo at Defiance, Millie was walking down because she wanted to get those pictures, and just as we were coming up, Sterling hollered, "Eagle," and we looked up, and a bald eagle fell out of the sky, grabbed a fish right there, snatched it up and took off, and Millie said, "Do you think he'll come again?" I said, "Well, that's the first one I've ever seen." But just
oh wow,
that was one of those shots I missed.
Yeah, well, you always miss
been a
shots.
perfect
You can't get them all.
that was a money shot. But
it was.
But you could see the demarcation, and actually there were trees coming down, but it's just water. And so what you want to do is make sure you don't tangle with anything when you come in, and you have to steer around the flotsam that's coming out. But after the first couple of curves, that goes away because it drives it to the bank, and then you get back into the regular Mississippi. But It's only scary right there because of the difference in the watercolor and the trash that comes down. They don't have any dams from St. Louis. Alton is the last dam, and so everything that's in the river from there to the Gulf of Mexico is in the river. Whereas we're fortunate to have enough dams that catch a lot of the trash coming down the Ohio.
Yeah, I bet they do. I bet they do. And of course, that certainly did cause problems with flatboats, was floating logs and
or
debris.
whirlpools and eddies that they get stuck in because they had no way to power out of them.
Right. So then down from, you passed Wycliffe, and then came down, I guess the next big thing to see was Columbus Belmont.
We had called, the lady that was in charge of the museum there had asked if we would stop there, being it was part of the period with the Civil War and whatnot. And I told her that I wasn't allowed to really change the schedule, but I could have a schedule breakdown. You know, something would malfunction, and I said I would accept a bribe, a bucket of chicken or whatever. And so she decided that she would feed all of us that there's like a Dairy Queen on Columbus Belmont property.
There is a little snack bar.
A little snack bar. And so I had my girlfriend bring my car from Cairo, and she ferried us back and forth up to where we could see Columbus Belmont Park, because that's a very impressive. The view from there is great.
Those bluffs are tremendous.
And we wanted to add that into the tour, and so we were able to stop there for lunch.
Well, that's great.
I'll tell you, Barry, Belmont, of all of the parts I've been in, this one was the most impressive. I just kind of put myself back into that era, and walking among all these bunkers and just seeing the anchor and the and it was just awesome.
You get some nice autumn foliage there too.
I did that. This was, I went back when we got to New Orleans, and we came back then. I came back to Indiana to wait for the boat to come back so I could take some more photographs, and then I turned around and went back to New Orleans and did the whole trip over again. So this picture in the fall was on my return trip.
I see.
So yeah, I just had to do it again, you know, and it was awesome. But this little park, oh, it's wonderful.
You know, there's something almost mystical about the rivers. You know, in Paducah, people go down and just sit and watch the river go by. I mean, what's the attraction that you all, that it had for you all, just being out there? Did you think back and pretend like you were a flatboat crew in the old days, or?
Well, we were a flatboat crew.
right.
And,
the real McCoy.
I was ripping along at 5.3 miles an hour, which is, it gives you enough time to study the river and, you know, to feel part of it, know what's going down. And it was a very enjoyable, very relaxing run. We were, the motors that we had were 4-cycle engines, and they were very quiet. And so, I mean, you were able to actually feel like you were just drifting along, but you were in absolute control at all times, which was very nice going down. We didn't have to worry about the hang-ups and the stick-ups. We didn't have to worry about the Indians. We didn't have to worry about the pirates.
Right.
Only thing we worried about is what Sterling was going to feed us.
And it sounded pretty good.
And once we got going, he brought a country ham, and the owner had never had a country ham before, and Sterling was slicing off the country ham and cooking it up, and all. He had him like, he was trained like a little bird. By the time we got to New Orleans, he was, all Sterling had to do was just fire up a stove, and he was there.
That's great. That's great. Of course, down from Columbus, you would have gone around the Madrid Bend, that little part of Kentucky that's cut off. That's a pretty sharp curve.
We stopped in New Madrid.
Yeah.
And that was one of the nice towns that we went in. All the little towns going down through there, the people were just so nice to come out. It was a event because we had publicized it in the local paper that we were going to come, and we would give tours, and the people were actually wanting to. It's a piece of history. That was the first boat that I know the first flatboat that had passed there in 50 years. And it was actually close enough to what the real ones looked like that they just wanted, out of curiosity, they wanted to see what it was.
Well, the one in 58, it didn't go all the way to New Orleans also?
It went all the way to New Orleans, but it was actually a raft on barrels. Back when you could weld 55-gallon drums together. Yeah. They did that and then just built a deck, built a little bit of a house on it, and went from there.
So it wasn't as authentic as this one?
As one of the men that was on it said, they had no insurance, they had no captain, They had plenty of beer. they decided they would do it, but they were lucky because they were in the JCs, and they would call ahead to the next town that had a chapter of the JCs, and the men would meet them, and they'd maybe take them out to eat. Maybe they would arrest them for polluting the water or something, and send them to have to eat breakfast with them the next morning. And there was a very good trip all the way down for them, and two of the guys that were on the original one came with us, and they wanted to do it one more time in their life.
That's great.
And
that's great. Well, you all, what was the most impressive photography? You obviously were complimenting Columbus Park. What's the most impressive photography, the scene to take pictures of you saw?
Well, I'll tell you, I was really fascinated by several things. One was the murals on the seawalls. They're just awesome, and I would have to say one of my favorites would be in Helena, Arkansas. That little town, if you go through and look at the mural, it's like the heart and soul is put on those murals, and I was very impressed by that. I had a great adventure with the cypress tree, a 300-year-old. That was a great adventure.
Where'd you find it?
Oh, in St. Francisville, Louisiana.
And
Cat Island.
Yeah.
And that was a big adventure, a 4-hour adventure, try to find this tree, because Bob had told me about it, and they wanted me to go find it and take a picture. Well, it was a big adventure.
Well,
but
is that in a park? That tree's in a park?
That's in a park. That's a Cat Island. And it's really, it's probably the best kept secret because they really don't want everyone to know about it. They don't want it defaced and things like that. And to get there, it was quite a journey to get back there to it.
The murals in Helena, were they done by the same folks that did the ones in Paducah?
Yes.
Yes.
He's from New Orleans. Dafford is his name.
Yeah.
And there's a Holiday Inn in New Orleans with a giant clarinet painted on the side
Well,
of it.
Vicksburg.
And he did
Saxophone.
that.
Well, there's a saxophone.
Well, he did the one thing, and we were in New Orleans before Christmas. There's a big clarinet on the side of this Holiday Inn. He did that.
All right.
So he does he's famous
I
for that.
think at Vicksburg he did those at Vicksburg.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Yeah, I think I seen his name there at Vicksburg.
He's quite well known for that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
So down past Memphis and heading on down, the river gets wider, obviously, the farther down you go.
It's not as populated. There's not as many things on the river. There's one thing I would like to say. You were talking about the different things that we saw. From the time that we left Rockport, the very best port that we came to was Paducah, Kentucky.
Well.
And the easiest to get off and on was Paducah, Kentucky. The easiest access for boaters and all, Paducah, Kentucky. And who wants to change that? Paducah, Kentucky. I just can't believe that they would, at the very best, the entire way, all the way to Memphis, is the existing Paducah, Kentucky ramp where the boaters could come down, where we could get off and we could have a car there, pick up, we could change fuel on, was here in Paducah. And even Evansville, Evansville was very nicely done, except you couldn't launch a boat and you couldn't drive down to where the boat was. It was too much uphill walking. And people, we had an injury where a lady fell trying to walk up because of uneven cobblestones and whatnot. Owensboro was nice where they used to have a dam where you could tie off, but nothing where you could actually, for the average boater to come down and launch their boat. And I certainly hope that they don't change that and put it in behind Anderson Court. That needs to be left alone because that's the best attraction we've got.
We've got the most unique riverfront, and they want to make it look like everybody else's, like Evansville.
Yeah.
It just, if you ever go to Evansville, I mean, it's nothing like Paducah, nowhere, all the way down.
And I would tell people you could stop here and you can go up to the bakery, and get you some hot rolls and fresh baked bread and some desserts, and it was wonderful. And all the people that were on our boat wanted to stay. They stopped at like the Harbor Plaza or Harbor Place. A lot of bed and breakfast down there that they stayed in. They were just thrilled to death.
Well, now, did you all spend any nights on the river itself, just out tied up somewhere?
I stayed all night at Rockport, and woke up in the middle of the night and Delta Queen was in full stride coming by. I heard her coming by. She's all lit up in full stride. That's the first time I'd seen her in full stride.
Wow.
And I thought, I wish I had a camera. I took a picture of it because I'd never seen that before. She had it going full, was really going full force. That water was just flying off with the paddles and stuff when she's going down.
Wow.
Usually when she leaves Paducah, she's just not going that fast, you know. But she was in full stride.
Wow.
Part of my contract was they would furnish me with a motel every night where I could get a hot shower and watch cable TV, and I enjoyed that very much. And the owner and the builder wanted to experience every mosquito bite and everything, you know, staying on the boat with no hot water or anything. And they told me that they woke up in the middle of the night and they heard a conversation. They thought somebody was on the boat. And they said it was 2 mosquitoes. And they were talking about, well, do you want to eat them here or take them outside? And the other mosquito said, oh, no, if we take them outside, the big ones will take them away from us.
Yeah, that river is the time we've canoed on it. We spent the night out, and I mean, you could hear it buzzing all night long. Yeah, I agree with you. To me, that's the ideal trip would be to have a nice motel at night, a hot meal, a hot shower, and a nice bed. Yeah, the camping out, I couldn't.
I brought one of the mosquitoes back with me in a styrofoam cup. Really?
Really? Yeah.
That's how big it was.
Oh, I bet.
I carried him in the styrofoam cup. I'd never seen them that big.
I bet.
The state bird in Louisiana
is the mosquito. Yeah. I'm sure that's true. That's true.
Barry, yeah. I think that the most exciting night that I had, I got to sleep in a pup tent right outside the fireboats. We had anchored there for the night down in Louisiana. And so we just set up our tents, and in the morning when I got up, I mean, everything was just drenched with dew. The only thing that was dry was my sleeping bag. But it was wonderful. I mean, you hear the night sounds all night, the river boats, and they have to check in. That was the check-in point, and with the fireboats, and it was awesome.
About what time of the day would you start and then quit, typically? Sterling would get up every morning at 4 o'clock, like a bird, fluttering around and all, and he'd get caught, and I'd have to get up he'd force me out of bed by at least 5, and we would get at the boat at about 6, and we would leave at first light, which would be about 7. He would fix a little something like some biscuits or whatnot, and we'd take off, and we'd be on the river about 7, 8 would be a late start because we wanted to burn all the sunlight that we could. You know, we wanted to catch it. Yeah. As soon as the fog would burn off and it looked good, we were gone.
I was going to ask you about that fog. One of the things I really remember was we got up about sunup and the fog coming off the river. I guess that happens all the time. And of course the visibility, it's kind of tricky. Of course we were in canoes trying to hug the shoreline, not get out in the big part. Well, coming down, I mean, did you all stay in the main channels?
Stayed in the main channel. It is often said that you don't want to even run over a Pepsi-Cola bottle out in the Mississippi River because it's hung on a branch, it's hung on a limb, it's hung on a big old tree. And so you try to stay right between the buoys, coming all the way, keeping radio contact. Now, being a licensed captain, I was responsible for anything that happened. So I wanted to make sure that if I hit something, it was in the channel. I was going to stay in the channel, I was going to stay in contact, and I took the boat all the way down without a nick on either propeller, without any scrapes on the side of the boat, which is kind of difficult to do. It's an accomplishment in itself. We had backup propellers in case we needed them because we were sure that we would hit something. You know, you can't, the muddy Mississippi, you can't tell when you're coming up toward shore, and when I would come in, I'd have to nose in, but I would try to keep the stern out in deep water, and we tied off. And therefore, I was able to do it without having any. I caught a little fishing line one time, and I caught the boat that was along with us. I pulled them part of the way, just so they could conserve some gas, and they wanted to eat. Sterling was cooking, so we tied them alongside, and they went to start the engines, and I couldn't get it in gear. And so when we pulled over in Osceola, Arkansas, I grabbed a knife and I dove in the Mississippi River. And I never thought anything about it, but you know, the entire trip I was the only one that actually got in the river. Now I'm used to doing diving and whatnot, but everybody rowed, but nobody swam. They didn't swim in the river like we do up here. And they had on our chase boat, they had a 2-inch line wrapped all around the propeller, and I was able to cut that out, and then they were able to shift gears and whatnot. And I told the owner that was scared in the Mississippi, I told him it was the collar off of a sea monster.
There you go. There you go.
Gave it to him for a souvenir.
One thing I think a lot of people are curious about is how deep is the Ohio and the Mississippi? Obviously it varies, but is there an average depth?
There is a guaranteed depth of 14 feet for navigation. For the barges, that's where you keep the dam 52 up and on, so you always have 14 feet all the way through. I hit pockets of between 35, 60 feet right there where the two rivers come together at Paducah. It's 60 to 80 foot deep right there where Owens Island is. There's a deep pocket there. When you go over dam 52, they have the washouts where they let the locks go and the bear traps and all into an area. There's some 100-foot holes right there. But the average depth would be around 30 feet going. I had my alarm set if I got above, say, 6 feet, that's when I would, it would start chirping, so I would be cautious coming in. I drew 4 feet. When my outdrive's down and everything, I wanted to make sure that 6 feet let me know, slow down, you know, lift your drives up and everything. Is where I had my alarm set.
About how many feet would an original flatboat draw?
About 2.
I was going to say.
I would like to say that the reason we drew more is we weren't actually a floating solid bottom boat. What had happened is the builder had gone in and put styrofoam inside the hull. The void between the bottom of the boat and the start was all filled full of styrofoam, so the boat could not sink. We wanted to make sure that there was, and there were spaces of what it was, if any water got in, it could go through and it would run out the bottom. The bottom wasn't watertight. It was actually floating like a pontoon boat. It was floating on these styrofoam logs inside, but they were encapsulated by the wood. So therefore it made the boat sit a little bit lower than if it had been a traditional boat.
Right.
Like a John boat. A John boat would have sat a little bit higher in the water. Then you would add on to it all the freight that you were carrying. And you would put the barrels of whiskey and whatever good trade goods that you had on it. They used a lot of liquor coming from the Owensboro area to distill, because you could take 10 barge loads of grain and you could distill it down into one flatboat full of whiskey.
And get more for it.
And get more for it, and it was easier to dispense as you were coming out, and I needed a favor, like a place to stay tonight. I could pour a pint off and give to you and trade it, and it was easier to dispense and going down. And it was actually a high dollar. That everybody wanted a good Kentucky bourbon that was aged in white oak barrels. That was the big draw down in New Orleans. And a lot of people don't realize that before the Louisiana Purchase, America ended in Natchez, Mississippi, when you'd go down and they would have to take the Natchez Trace back up. So along this line, when we got down to Natchez, I'd rode a motorcycle back the Trace just so I could kind of feel a little bit of the experience. The pathway is still there. It's now it's a 50-mile-an-hour spot, but for people around here that have never done it, it runs between Nashville, Tennessee and Natchez.
Right.
And what would happen is the men would go down there and they would sell the goods, and they would take whatever money, buy a horse, and they would either walk with it or take a horse and come back up the Natchez Trace before we got all the way to New Orleans.
Are parts of the Natchez Trace like preserved, like in little parks and things where you can see bits of it?
All of the Natchez Trace is preserved coming from Natchez all the way in, but they have it, it's probably just the line of sight. The roadway, they might have a few little places off it. It's hard access on and off. You have to come through the different towns that want to get on. It's guarded access. They have a ranger that watches it. So watch your speed going through there. It's 50 miles an hour, not 53. And they will stop you and let you know that it's 50 miles an hour through there.
Valuable information.
But it's a non-commercial. You can't have any kind of, they're not supposed to pull campers. You're not supposed to pull trailers of any kind on it. It's supposed just to see what it was like, and you go through Jackson and different towns like that, and it's just a very relaxing trip. Wonderful motorcycle trip.
I bet it would be. Yeah. So then down to, of course, Vicksburg. Did you all stop at Vicksburg and see the
Absolutely.
sights?
Yeah. Love Vicksburg too.
Those bluffs, those huge bluffs there. Yeah.
We made another stop unscheduled that wanted us was Tunica. they have a new museum there. They were trying to make Tunica more family oriented. So instead of just having the gambling casinos, the casinos kicked in, and they made a boat that you could go for a dinner cruise if you wanted to actually go out with the family up and down the river. Built a wonderful facility, a dock, and then outside of the dock they built a river heritage museum similar to what we have here.
Yeah.
But it goes back to DeSoto and discovering the river.
Oh, yeah.
A lot into the Civil War, but it's a top-notch museum. And they bribed us with catfish dinners. They said that they would have fish for lunch, and so I had another mechanical failure.
I understand.
And came in there, unscheduled stop for an hour. But they treated us outstanding. That was before Helena.
Yeah.
And then we were coming on down Greenville, great stop. Vicksburg, we absolutely wanted to stop in Vicksburg, and when I came before to get permission from the mayor and whatnot with the mayor of Vicksburg told me, he said, you might want to play down a little bit on the Lincoln when you come into Vicksburg. And he said, you might not remember, but Vicksburg was the Gibraltar of the South. I said, yes, I knew about that. He said, well, Vicksburg fell on the 4th of July. And he said until 2 years ago, they wouldn't even celebrate the 4th of July in Vicksburg.
I'd heard that.
Because it would remind the people of the bombs bursting in air and it being the attack and the city falling.
Yeah. What about Natchez? Was that interesting?
Beautiful town.
Yeah.
Yeah, love Natchez.
And it wasn't burned. You see, Vicksburg was burned,
Oh, it
so
was
they
part
lost
of
a
the
lot
siege, right.
of the really nice homes. But in Natchez, the mansions and stuff are still there. And it was a very nice, beautiful town. And I think that the people there were just wonderful. Now, I made sure the national park has the grounds. There's no place to tie a boat up. You can't just go to Natchez and tie up, like Paducah, you could tie a boat. You can't there. I'd stopped, and the mayor had told me that I could tie up in Natchez under the hill, which was just a little boat ramp.
Yeah.
And I said, can I have a letter stating that I have permission to do that? He said, that's my first political favor. And he gave me a letter. And the Natchez would allow the Delta Queen, the Mississippi Queen, the American Queen, and me to tie a boat up there.
Yeah.
And so I tied it up, and a forest ranger told me I couldn't. I said, I've got a letter from the mayor, and there was nothing he could say.
Yeah.
But there's no place that they don't have a friendly, they're not recreational boat friendly. That's why people go down the Tennessee Tom Bigby.
Yeah.
That's more of a recreational thing, and
Right.
people are scared to go down to Mississippi because they think it's there's snags in there, and they think that it's a long way in between. Which, if we didn't have a chase truck with gasoline on it, we would have been scared a few times trying to get fuel. And now I've delivered a lot of boats, and I've filled 300-gallon tanks with 2 5-gallon cans. And boy, it takes a whole lot of energy to pack them down the river. But we were able to do it because we had a boat.
People, and of course, the lower Mississippi, I've talked to river people, and these stories about these giant whirlpools that'll take a boat under and all this kind of stuff. And people, that's sort of a mystical. You were kidding about the sea monster or the river monster there at the confluence. People, I've heard stories about people with these gigantic whirlpools, and I thought, I don't believe that's true. I've never heard anything like that.
Most of the gigantic whirlpools that you see now are buoys that are caught with either driftwood or maybe a piece of a dock. And the weight has drug them down, and they have a gigantic whirlpool going around. But what it is, it's a buoy underneath the water. And you have to steer wide to make sure that you're away from them, because they'll come across and get you.
Oh, yeah.
But they can swing the whole radius of that chain.
Yeah.
But that's only real whirlpools that I saw. That, and they have some currents when you go through the bridges down in Vicksburg and in Natchez. But you line up for it, and as an old Cajun captain told me, if you put the nose through, the butt will follow. And you try to put the nose through at the right time, and don't get off of it, stay right on it. You can take a string of barges through there, or you can take a flatboat. But if you start to back off, you'll feel the suction of those pillars.
Pull you into the piers, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. There's a big bridge at Greenville, too, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah. So as you're getting down closer to New Orleans, were you sad the trip was over, or glad, tired, wanted to?
When we got to New Orleans, when we actually got into the big, heavy industrialized river, was at Baton Rouge. And from Baton Rouge down, they had never, I was the only one on the boat that had been down that way and knew what to expect coming in. And I said, you're not really welcome coming down through there because they got ships, they got ocean liners coming. It's all commercial. There's not very many places to stop and stay in. And Millie got chased off by Homeland Security a couple of times. They almost confiscated her camera.
What was that all about?
Actually, Barry, I got stopped 3 times the whole trip by Homeland Security. One, I was photographing the top of the steam coming out of the top because they had such unusual formations coming out. And all of a sudden, here comes all the cars, the police cars, and Homeland Security. Well, they called them, and they come, and they wanted to see everything in the camera. And I thought, well, listen, I can delete this right now, you know, and so, because they were going to take the camera. And so I deleted it, and they were okay with that.
And these are photographs of what now?
Of the refinery. It's the where the steam comes out at the top.
Right.
And nothing at the refinery, just the steam.
Right.
But that wasn't, you know, I had to delete it.
So how did they spot you? Just
I don't know. I was just there on the side of the road taking photographs, and first thing I know, here they come in the car, and they wanted to know what I was doing, wanted to see they took my driver's license, they did a check, and I was like, oh my gosh, you know, and there was a big sugarcane field on one side and the refinery on this side. And it's like, oh my gosh. So anyway, they let me go. And then further down by Vacheray, I went up on the levee, and I had my telephoto lens on, and I was looking for them because I could, you know, I didn't have binoculars, and there was 2 big ships that was anchored outside of there. Well, all of a sudden, here comes another police car, comes up there and wanted to know what I was doing, and did all the checking again. And I said, I'm just looking for the flatboat. You know, I told him who I was and the whole thing, and he says, well, you have to. He wanted to see what I had, and I showed him, and I didn't have anything there actually, and I was just looking. And so anyway, I had to get off the levee. That was the one thing, you were not allowed to walk on the levees at all, nowhere, because that was just forbidden. And so anyway, I did that, and then when we got to New Orleans, I went on beyond. I went all the way to Pilot Town. The trip was over. Mm-hmm. And this plantation was just awesome the way it was built, and it was up on stilts, and it was just unusual. So I was taking a photograph, and all of a sudden here comes another police car and Homeland Security, another car, and they wanted to know what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm taking a photograph of the plantation because it's so unusual. Well, they wanted to see it, and they says, well, we're sorry, we thought you were taking it was like a little box, and I hadn't really noticed it, but it was something to do with the oil. And right on the other side of the plantation, that's what they thought I was taking a photograph of. So I was like, oh my gosh, you know, 3 times. Wow. I've got to just, you know, cool it here. But it was, they were all very nice, but the first one was really shaky though. Because I had never experienced anything like that.
You mentioned coming down from Baton Rouge. Did you have to be extra careful because now you're dealing with ocean-going vessels as well as tows?
Absolutely, and they are extremely fast. When, as I said, I was making 5.2, and with the current, I was doing about 10 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And they could overtake me quick, so we were. I had Sterling watching extra careful behind me, and I had a television monitor that I could kick up to. I could look down and see behind me and in front of me, and we were in contact with everything. But most of the ships didn't want to talk to you. You'd have to really get down on them, and they were, instead of going on 16, they were on 61, and we would international signals and whatnot, but they were, as long as you were aware. I wanted to make sure that I only did that stretch of river. It had to be very bright, broad open daylight.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, coming down, and we had a couple of spots where we could stop. In Vacheray, I had made a contact with the American Commercial Barge Line that would allow us to come across their property to fuel. And the people that were on board thought, oh, we could just pull up anywhere and fuel, and we found out real quick that wasn't so. I think that some of the problems that Millie had to do with Illinois license plates. If it were Louisiana license plates, might not have had, and being a female by herself up there, and a very big expensive camera might have, you know, ticked them off. And, Plus, we had a lot of people that didn't have very much to do. You know, that Homeland Security down there is it's kind of confusing. There's too many people in Homeland Security, from the deputy sheriffs to the guards to this. Everything is suddenly become a security conscious area, and so they haven't called Bubba this month. They finally saw somebody go over the flood wall and or the levee, and so they make the call in to make sure that he's not getting his check for nothing.
So when you got to New Orleans, where did you dock in the city? Where did the trip come to the end?
We were going to go through Lake Pontchartrain, but they were working on that particular lock. And being I had worked in the oil field, I knew about the Harvey Canal, and it was easier coming in to the Harvey Canal. And the fact that, once again, I had Mercury engines on there. There was a Mercury dealer in New Orleans, which I had stopped and said, would you like to tour the boat or have it up here if you have any customers? Because we really appreciate y'all, Mercury letting us use these engines. Well, he happened to own some property that had been in his family for a long period of time, and he told me that we could dock for free just right down the road, and he let us tie up. And so we were able to go down there and tie up, and luckily for us, he extended that because it took us another 10 or 12 days before we could get the boat. We had to get a special trailer, and we had to get special straps to get the boat up onto the trailer. And then we had to have special escorts to get out of the area in Harvey and come across the highway, across the bridge to bring the boat back.
Well, now where is Harvey in relation to the actual city of New Orleans?
It's across the river on the west bank, and it would be you go through New Orleans on the west side, through the city of Gretna, and then it's Harvey, and then past that it's West Wego.
Okay.
It's right on the other side. It's the side of the New Orleans that didn't get flooded. It just got the storm damage when they had Katrina.
Right. So you actually came down past, well, where the French Quarter would be and the Jackson Square?
No, sir, I was above that. I went underneath the Huey P. Long Bridge.
You know where that is?
Probably halfway between the Greater New Orleans Bridge and the Huey P. Long Bridge, Avondale Shipyard.
Okay.
After you pass that, over on the right-hand side, you'll see a little canal that comes off. It's part of the Intercoastal. And it's where all the working boats, like the oil field boats and all, can cut through and go out to the Gulf, or they could come up the Intercoastal Waterway and cut through and go into the Mississippi.
Okay. I believe we have 1 minute left. So getting this boat back, now that had to be a pretty good job getting it back to from New Orleans. It
was a trip. Now, I wasn't involved that much in it because I just knew where to tie it up. And once I turned the engines off in New Orleans, we were able to come home.
Well, now, where did the boat wind up? Where is it now?
Mr. Drake has it in a pond behind his house.
And that is where?
That's in Terre Haute, Indiana.
And Mr. Drake's first name is?
It was Ron Drake. He is an attorney who commissioned to have the original boat built. And so he has it. I think it's going to be a playhouse or something for his kid. I don't really know what they're doing with it. It happened up there. It was going to go back to the Lincoln Center, and I don't know, something came up here or there, but anyway, it's behind his house.
Do you know how long it took him to get it home?
Yes, I do. I was there when it came home, and it was really it came home on the 19th of October, and I was standing in the middle of Highway 41 waiting for the truck that was bringing it home to come off the interstate to get photographs. And then, of course, it came south on 41, and then it went through all the cornfields out to his farm. And he actually has a 5-mile lake. It's a pretty big lake on his farm. And then they had 2 big cranes to come and lift it off of the truck. And it was quite an experience just to see the whole thing and how it worked.
We are out of time. I went by a lot faster than you even thought, probably. So, my guests today were Robert Cherry, Sterling Edwards, Millie Carter, flatboat crew extraordinaire. I'm Barry Craig. Please join us next time.